For every X-Men icon fans grew up admiring, there's a character viewers question from the very first scene, starting with Cyclops. The year 2000 brought the X-Men to the big screen, and Scott Summers was supposed to be the leader, holding everything together. In the comics, Cyclops had always been that way, disciplined, strategic, the heart of the team. James Marsden seemed perfectly cast, but the films never gave him a real chance to shine. Right from the start, Wolverine stole the spotlight. Hugh Jackman's character got the action sequences and emotional arcs, while Cyclops stood in the background firing optic blasts. Fans who loved the character in the comics were frustrated watching their favorite leader reduced to Jean Grey's jealous boyfriend.
Gotta be careful. I might not be there next time. Oh, and Logan, stay away from my girl.
Then came X-Men: The Last Stand, and things got worse. Early in the film, Cyclops was unceremoniously killed off-screen by a possessed Jean Grey. For a founding member of the team, it was disrespectful. Fans were livid that one of Marvel's most iconic leaders was tossed aside like an afterthought. The problem wasn't Marsden's acting, it was how the character was written. Cyclops felt stiff and one-dimensional, reduced to the uptight authority figure who clashed with Wolverine.
Logan, I'd like you to meet Aurora Monroe, also called Storm. This is Scott Summers, also called Cyclops.
There was no exploration of his trauma or any acknowledgement of why he wore the visor. He was just the guy who gave orders and got ignored. Even the prequel films couldn't fix the damage. Ty Sheridan's younger Cyclops in Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix showed potential, but once again, he was overshadowed by Mystique and Jean Grey. No matter the timeline, Scott Summers was destined to be treated as secondary.
There's nothing to be afraid of. It's quite tough.
For many fans, Cyclops represents wasted potential. He should have been the emotional center audiences rallied behind. Hopefully, the MCU gives Cyclops the adaptation he deserves. None of the movies have ever captured how essential Cyclops is to the X-Men, or how great of a leader or a great fighter he is. Instead, he became a symbol of how the franchise prioritized certain characters over others, leaving one of its founding members forgotten. But if Cyclops showed how sidelining a character can ruin their legacy, Wolverine proved the exact opposite, how the right actor can turn a role into something legendary. Standing at 6'2", Hugh Jackman was nearly a foot taller than Wolverine in the comics. Fans were skeptical about the casting for 2000's X-Men. But the moment he appeared on screen, claws out and snarling, all doubts vanished. Jackman didn't just play Wolverine, he became him. From the first film, Jackman brought something raw and magnetic to the role. Wolverine was tough and dangerous, but also deeply human, a loner haunted by a past he couldn't remember.
Logan, wake up.
Jackman captured that pain, that rage, and that surprising tenderness in every scene. Suddenly, a character popular in the comics became a global icon. Over 17 years, Jackman's Wolverine became the anchor of the entire franchise. While other characters came and went, he was the constant. X2 gave him one of the best action sequences in superhero history, defending the X-Mansion from Stryker soldiers in a brutal 6-minute showcase. It wasn't just about violence, it was about protecting the people he'd come to care about. The character kept evolving. The Wolverine explored Logan's struggle with immortality and the weight of losing everyone he loved. Even when the film stumbled in its final act, Jackman's performance kept it grounded. Not only is Hugh a phenomenal actor, but his intensity and the way he portrays Wolverine is just perfection. Born to play the role, just as Robert Downey Jr. was made to be Iron Man. Then came Logan. After nearly 2 decades, Jackman delivered a finale that hit harder than almost anything in the superhero genre. Set in a bleak future where mutants were nearly extinct, Logan was older, broken, barely holding on. His healing factor was failing. For the first time, he had something to fight for beyond himself. A young girl named Laura who shared his powers. The film stripped away spectacle to focus on what made Wolverine human. When Logan died protecting Laura and the other children, entire audiences sat in stunned silence. It was the kind of send-off few superhero characters ever get, cementing Jackman's portrayal as one of the greatest in the genre.
Take your friends and run. They'll keep coming and coming. Yes. You don't have to fight anymore.
Even his return in Deadpool and Wolverine proved his impact. For nearly 2 decades, he defined what it meant to play a superhero with commitment and heart. For many, Hugh Jackman isn't just one version of Wolverine. He is Wolverine. While Wolverine became the face of the X-Men on screen, another casting choice sparked endless frustration from fans who felt the character was completely mishandled. By the time X-Men First Class hit theaters in 2011, Jennifer Lawrence was already an Oscar nominee. Her casting as young Mystique seemed promising, and at first it worked. First Class gave her a compelling arc, struggling with her identity, torn between Charles Xavier's idealism and Magneto's embrace of mutant pride. But as the sequels rolled out, problems emerged. By Days of Future Past and especially Apocalypse, Mystique was being pushed to the forefront not because the story demanded it, but because Lawrence had become a massive star. The morally complex shapeshifter was now leading the X-Men, giving pep talks, functioning as the team's moral center. For fans, it felt wrong.
Looks like you and I have that in common now.
No, I meant, you're back.
Lawrence's performance also declined. While she'd been compelling in First Class, her energy drained with each sequel. In Apocalypse, she appeared visibly bored, going through the motions. The films kept finding excuses for her not to wear the blue makeup. Lawrence had made it clear she hated the process, and the studio accommodated by having Mystique spend most screen time in human form. The makeup became a major issue. Lawrence spoke openly about how miserable it was. 8-hour application, skin irritation, toxic fumes she had to breathe. By Dark Phoenix, it was obvious she didn't want to be there anymore. Fans noticed the contradiction. Mystique had always embraced her true form, seeing her blue skin as beautiful. That was her entire arc in First Class. But now, because of behind-the-scenes compromises, she spent most time looking like Jennifer Lawrence instead of Mystique. The message felt hollow. The final straw came when Dark Phoenix killed her off early. It should have been emotional, but it fell flat. Audiences weren't invested. The character had been stretched too thin, forced into a role that never fit. Looking back, Lawrence's Mystique is remembered for what went wrong rather than right. Studio interference, an actress who'd lost interest, and a character forced into an ill-fitting position combined to create one of the franchise's most frustrating arcs. And while Mystique showed how studio decisions can undermine a character, Deadpool proved how passion and perfect casting can save even the most unlikely superhero. Back in 2009, Ryan Reynolds first played Wade Wilson in X-Men Origins Wolverine, and it was a disaster. The Merc with a mouth was stripped of everything special. No humor, no fourth wall breaks, and worst of all, his mouth was sewn shut. Fans were furious, and Reynolds himself knew it was a betrayal. Instead of walking away, Reynolds spent years fighting to get a real Deadpool movie made. Studios rejected it repeatedly, insisting an R-rated superhero comedy wouldn't work. But test footage leaked online in 2014, and the fan response was so overwhelming that Fox finally greenlit the project. The 2016 film delivered everything fans wanted. Reynolds brought non-stop sarcasm, meta humor, and surprisingly heartfelt moments. It wasn't just funny, it was authentic to the comics, in a way superhero films rarely managed. Audiences connected instantly, and the movie became one of the highest grossing R-rated films ever.
I'm touching myself tonight.
What makes the role stand out is how personal it became for Reynolds. He was the driving force behind the film's existence. He pushed for years, faced constant rejection, and refused to give up. Fans respected that dedication. Deadpool is so successful because it's finally a character where Ryan Reynolds can unleash his own craziness without any limit. Deadpool 2 reinforced his hold on the character. The sequel leaned further into humor while adding emotional depth with Cable and Russell. Reynolds proved he could balance absurdity with genuine heart, and the film became another massive hit. Now, with Deadpool officially crossing into the MCU alongside Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, the character's legacy is stronger than ever. Reynolds didn't just play Deadpool, he saved him. For fans, it's one of the clearest examples of how the right actor and role can be inseparable.
I am soaking wet right now.
But while Reynolds proved persistence could turn a doomed character into a phenomenon, another young actress faced impossible expectations and struggled under the weight of them. Fresh off Game of Thrones success, Sophie Turner stepped into the role of Jean Grey for X-Men Apocalypse in 2016. The character was one of the most powerful and emotionally complex X-Men, and fans were curious how Turner would handle it. Unfortunately, something felt off from the start. In Apocalypse, John barely registered. She had a few scenes hinting at the Phoenix Force, but there was no real depth or presence. Turner's performance felt wooden, lacking the intensity that made Jean Grey compelling in the comics. Fans hoped it was just limited screen time and she'd get a chance to shine later. That chance came with Dark Phoenix and it went horribly wrong. The film was meant to be Jean's story, her transformation into the Phoenix and the devastating consequences. It should have been emotional, tragic, and powerful. Instead, it felt hollow.
I told you to stay away.
That's never gonna happen.
Please, stop.
Turner's performance lacked the range needed to carry the film. Moments that should have hit hard, Jean losing control, turning on her friends, struggling with the voice inside her, came across as flat and unconvincing. The character's emotional journey felt rushed and underdeveloped. Part of the problem was the troubled production, reshoots, delays, behind-the-scenes chaos, but even within those constraints, Turner struggled to make Jean feel real. Comparisons to Famke Janssen's version didn't help. Janssen had brought warmth and vulnerability that made her transformation genuinely tragic. She made audiences care. Turner's version never reached that level. The film bombed at the box office and effectively killed the X-Men franchise as it existed. While Turner wasn't solely to blame, her performance became a focal point of criticism. For fans who'd waited years to see the Phoenix Saga done justice, it was a massive disappointment. Looking back, Turner's Jean Grey is remembered as one of the weakest portrayals in the franchise. It's a reminder that even talented actors can struggle with poor writing and chaotic productions. For fans, it's wasted potential, a character who deserved better but never got the chance. She had so much potential, but they wrote her so bad. And while Jean Grey showed how a performance can fall short, Professor X proved the exact opposite, how the perfect actor can elevate a character into something unforgettable. Already respected for his stage work and iconic role as Captain Picard in Star Trek, Patrick Stewart took a risk stepping into superhero films with 2000's X-Men. Comic book movies weren't the cultural juggernauts they are today. There was no guarantee it would work. But from the opening scene, Stewart's presence transformed the film. His voice, calm and authoritative, grounded everything. Professor X wasn't just a powerful telepath, he was a visionary, a mentor, a man burdened by protecting mutants in a world that hated them. Stewart brought gravitas that made audiences take the story seriously.
But I've never seen anything like this before.
As the franchise grew, so did Stewart's importance. His relationship with Magneto, played brilliantly by Ian McKellen, became the emotional core. The two old friends turned ideological enemies elevated every scene they shared. Their debates about mutant rights and survival gave the film's weight. It wasn't just about superpowers, it was about philosophy, about fighting for a better world when that world refuses to accept you. Stewart's Professor X wasn't perfect, and that made him compelling. The Last Stand showed him making morally questionable decisions, suppressing Jean Grey's powers without consent.
Trust me, you're a danger to everyone and yourself, but I can help you. I think you want to give her the cure. Look what happened to Scott. You killed the man you loved because you couldn't control your power. No, stop it!
Days of Future Past explored a younger, broken Charles who'd lost hope. Logan delivered his most heartbreaking performance yet, an elderly, deteriorating Charles Xavier, whose telepathic abilities had become dangerous to everyone around him. Watching Stewart's Charles struggle with dementia, guilt, and the knowledge his powers had caused harm was devastating. His quiet death in that film felt earned. After years of leading the X-Men and fighting for a better future, he died in the care of the man he'd once mentored. Even with James McAvoy's strong portrayal of young Charles in the prequels, Stewart remained the definitive Professor X. His voice, his presence, his ability to convey wisdom and vulnerability in equal measure made Charles Xavier one of the most beloved characters in the franchise. For many, Patrick Stewart didn't just play Professor X, he embodied him. Decades later, fans still hold him up as the gold standard for superhero casting, but if Stewart showed how the perfect actor can define a character, another casting showed how even great actors can be buried under poor creative choices. Halle Berry had just won an Academy Award when she was cast as Storm in the original X-Men trilogy. On paper, it seemed perfect. Storm is one of the most powerful and iconic X-Men, a weather-controlling mutant with regal presence and emotional complexity. Fans expected Barry to bring that strength and dignity to the screen, but from the first film in 2000, something felt wrong. Barry's Storm was stiff and lifeless, delivering lines with an odd, dramatic cadence that felt forced.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning?
This became one of the most mocked moments in superhero history. It wasn't just bad writing, it was the delivery, like she was performing Shakespeare instead of fighting a villain. As the trilogy continued, Storm remained underdeveloped. She had powers and a costume, but no real arc. While Wolverine, Jean, and even Rogue got emotional storylines, Storm was relegated to the background. Barry's performance never improved. She seemed disconnected, going through motions without fully committing. The animated Storm, voiced by Alison Seeley Smith, had set a high bar: powerful, compassionate, commanding respect.
Mistress of the elements commands you to release that child.
Lighten up on the speeches.
Barry's version felt like a pale imitation. Even when Storm was given leadership moments in X2, Barry couldn't make the character feel authoritative or compelling. Things didn't improve with the later films. In Apocalypse, Storm was reimagined with Alexandra Shipp playing a younger version. While Shipp brought more energy, the damage was done. Storm had been mishandled so long that audiences didn't care anymore. Her abilities go beyond elemental, and I wish they showcased that more. Barry herself later admitted she wasn't happy with how Storm was written. She felt the character never got deserved development, and she was right, but fans remember the stiff deliveries, the lack of presence, the wasted potential. Storm deserves storylines exploring her claustrophobia, leadership struggles, connection to nature. Instead, she became a punchline. And while Barry wasn't entirely to blame, her performance became the face of everything that went wrong. And that disappointment becomes sharper when you look at Magneto, a villain who became one of the most compelling and sympathetic characters in the entire franchise. Few actors could bring what Ian McKellen brought to Magneto, a sense of lived pain and moral complexity that made audiences question who the real villain was. From his first appearance in 2000's X-Men, Eric Lehnsherr wasn't just a mutant terrorist. He was a Holocaust survivor who'd seen humanity at its worst and refused to let it happen again.
It's completely unstable.
Only in the wrong hands.
You trust her? She's one of them.
So were you once.
That backstory, shown in the film's opening, grounded everything Magneto did. His extremism wasn't born from evil, it came from trauma and fierce determination to protect his people. McKellen played him not as a monster, but as someone pushed past compromise. Every scene with Patrick Stewart's Professor X crackled with tension, not because they hated each other, but because they loved each other and couldn't reconcile opposing views. McKellen's performance was layered and nuanced. He could be terrifying, cold, calculating, willing to sacrifice innocent lives for mutant kind's greater good. But he could also be heartbreaking. In X2, his quiet moment with Pyro, encouraging the young mutant to embrace his power, felt less like manipulation and more like mentorship. The Last Stand gave Magneto one of his most chilling moments. After the government develops a cure for mutants, he leads an army to destroy it. But in the final battle, he's injected with the cure and loses his powers. Watching McKellen play that moment, the shock, the devastation, the loss of identity, was gutting. It wasn't just about losing powers, it was losing everything that defined him.
This is what they want for all of us.
Days of Future Past brought McKellen back alongside his younger self, played by Michael Fassbender. The two versions represented different stages of the same man. McKellen's scenes in the future timeline were brief but impactful, reminding audiences why Magneto had always been the franchise's most compelling antagonist. For many fans, McKellen's portrayal remains the definitive Magneto. He brought dignity, intelligence, and heartbreak to a role that could have been one-dimensional. He made Eric Lehnsherr one of the most tragic and sympathetic figures in superhero cinema.